If he'd brought us out of Egypt, yet had not judged the Egyptians, yet had not judged the Egyptians, Daenu, 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 it would have been enough for us, Daenu, 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 it would have been enough. If he had judged the Egyptians, yet had not judged their false gods, yet had not judged their false gods, Daenu, 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 it would have been enough for us, Daenu, 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 it would have been enough. If he had judged their false gods, yet had not slain their firstborn, yet had not slain their firstborn, Daenu, 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 it would have been enough for us, Daenu, 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 it would have been enough. If he had slain their firstborn, yet had not given us their wealth, yet had not given us their wealth, Daenu, 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 it would have been enough for us, Daenu, 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 it would have been enough.
Hello and welcome to a special Passover episode of Still Watching the Skies. I'm Robert Reinecke.
I'm Nat Almorel.
And unfortunately, Cody Lang could not join us today because of transportation issues. I believe he's stuck in Montreal still. But we're going to carry on without him because we are up against a little bit of a time crunch because we want to make sure that we get it out on time for the upcoming holiday. We do our periodic holiday specials where we deviate from our usual format. And like the erstwhile Batman villain, the Calendar Man, we are open to more than just the major holidays as far as what we're going to work with. And I came up with the idea of doing a Passover special based on the 1937 Polish film in Yiddish, the Dybbuk. So I'm going to give a brief synopsis of it, talk about some of the major principles behind it, and then we will get into a discussion. The Dybbuk, again, filmed in 1937. There are two friends, one named Sender, and Sender's friend named Nissen, who make a vow that since both of their wives are expecting, that if one of the children ends up being a boy and the other ends up being a girl, that they will arrange for them to be married when the time comes. Unfortunately, Sender's wife dies on giving birth to her daughter, and Nissen drowns on the way to getting back to his wife, and she gives birth to a son. And because of the deaths, the two families drift apart, and the vow is forgotten by Sender, who in the meantime becomes kind of rich and miserly, while Nissen's son Chonin grows up in poverty and turns to the studies of the Kabbalah. 18 years later, they meet up, though they don't know who each other is, and Chonin is invited into Sender's household for dinner, where he falls for Sender's daughter Layla, or Leah for short. Leah for short, but Sender has other plans for Leah with an arranged marriage. Chonin has fallen in love for it, and he turns to the mystical side of Judaism and tries to cast spells and call on Satan to interfere with this potential match. But ultimately it leads to no avail, as Sender has promised Leah to another. Although at this point, Sender does figure out who Chonin is, although he is determined to carry out with the match. At this point, Chonin gets more desperate and ultimately dies in an attempt to, I guess, summon Satan to help him deal with this issue. And Leia starts to come apart, calls for Chonin to attend their wedding on her wedding day, at which point the spirit of Chonin possesses Leia as a Dybbuk. Things come to a head after that, as there's basically a Jewish exorcism set up by the main rabbi, which it turns out to be successful, but Leia basically dies rather than be separated from Chonin, so that their spirits are united in the afterlife. That sound about right?
I think so. Maybe mention that it originally was a play.
Yep.
Or it's an adaptation of a stage play.
Yes, by S. Ansky. It was directed by Michael Washinsky or Mikhail Wadzinski, depending on when you're looking at his career, who was legendarily directed like 1 out of every 4 Polish films back in the day.
When there weren't even 4 Polish films to be directed.
And it has a Jewish cast. We got Abraham Morowski as the rabbi, Zeriel. We have, who I haven't mentioned, but I probably should have, Ajik Samberg as the messenger, who is kind of a spiritual messenger that seems to come and go and make pronouncements of seemingly God origin at various points. We have Sender is played by Mojez Lipman. Sender's daughter Leia is played by Lily Liliana. Shonen is played by Leon Liebgold. Sender's sister Freda is played by Dina Hepburn. And let's see who else is here that might be of note. I think that's the main cast, and I think I'm going to throw it to you just to get your general thoughts on this, Nat.
Okay. Well, thank you, Robert. I also really appreciate the Calendar Man reference, and I look forward, as the years go by, and just rooting up obscure holidays from hopefully like further ancient religions or even fictional religions.
Ooh.
Where we could be wholly all-inclusive. Nevertheless, I think it's a great idea, and I think it's really fun for a number of reasons. One, this is just going to be a very interesting movie to talk about because it is a very long movie. It is a movie that I think has some serious issues with pacing. On the other hand, I think it's very well crafted outside of that. Just, I think a lot of the camera work is really well thought out and imaginative and certainly competent. I think there are quite a few very good performances in this as well. I think just the overall story is very intriguing, and I think the overall Jewishness of it, like, watching this, I'm thinking, what is a good corollary to this kind of movie today? And because I think that, I think it's very much like a Jewish parable, and it's intended for a predominantly Jewish audience, which probably would be a fairly large demographic in Poland. Nevertheless, even at this time, I think there's a lot of movies that probably would not isolate themselves from other audiences quite as much. And so, something that you may see kind of like in that same vein these days would be, like those Christian movies with Kirk Cameron, or I'm trying to think the two brothers who make like the extreme Christian movies. Although I've seen some of those and they're nowhere near as good as I think this one is. Or something like Passion of the Christ, might be a little bit better in terms of really kind of getting into the nitty gritty, because there is, I think, a good deal of theology in here, and I think that's kind of what a lot of the film rests on. At times, it can be a bit of a crutch, but overall, I think. I'm very divided on it. I think it's a 2-hour movie, or at least the version I watched was 2 hours, and I think a lot of that could be cut pretty much, from the first part, from the first hour even. Probably you could compact all the story that occurs in that into about 20 minutes or so, and the rest of it, almost with little exaggeration or hyperbole, is singing. and not like very fun singing. This is not the movie I plan to go out and buy the soundtrack for.
It's not Fiddler on the Roof.
No, it is not. It's a lot of hymnals, a lot of procession marches, a lot of very, very dour kind of tones to it. The music is not that upbeat. It's very, very solemn, and yet the movie I think is right on the edge of being a musical, but it's not. It's incidental. Like in a normal musical, it would be the songs that kind of like drive the plot, or comment on the action. And
yeah, this is flavor and atmosphere.
Yes, exactly.
Or texture.
Mm-hmm. It's just something that kind of maybe out of religious necessity or piety or something like that. But yeah, and we don't really see the. I think with the exception of Leo, we don't really sing or see the other main characters singing. But those are just some initial thoughts. How about you, Robert?
Yeah, I really ended up enjoying this film a lot. I agree that the first hour could stand a little bit of streamlining, but I thought the individual scenes themselves were all fine and good, but it didn't really take off. But I think around about the hour mark, I thought it got really good, especially around the wedding sequence and the Dance of the Dead. I thought, like, oh, well, this is clearly a guy that has a visual imagination. He's not just going through the paces here, because I think that's a sequence that, out of context, stands out as a pretty terrific sequence, and in context, it works even better. I thought you can tell that it was a first-class effort here, because there's a lot of attention to the art direction here, and it really is a very unique film, and I think it even gains more uniqueness with the fact that just in a few years, all of this would be pretty much destroyed. Mm-hmm. And it's something, a monument to this era of Jewish history in Europe. Mm-hmm. I was reading up on Waschinski. In fact, I came across this movie reading Simon Cowell's book on Orson Welles, or a third volume of the book, One Man Band. Waschinski became an assistant director on Othello with Welles, and I think looking at it, you can see that these two...
I can believe that, yeah.
...were made to work together. And he had grown up in a Polish shtetl initially, and he moved to Berlin, where he became an assistant to F.W. Murnau on Nosferatu. And then he returned to Poland, where he created maybe one of the founders of the Polish film industry at the time. Mm-hmm. So he had quite a pedigree there. Yeah,
and I think you were talking about art direction, and I was just thinking in terms of something like the sets. Whereas I would expect a lot of films at this time, like it's strange because they kind of go back and forth. Like I very seldomly did I feel like I was really looking at a overall stagey set, but I do think there's definitely some expressionism in some of like the backgrounds, but I think overall it comes off as being like fairly realistic. Again, even though this is based on a stage production, and this is kind of fairly early on in cinema's life, where you do tend to have like overly stagey or theatrical films, I feel this feels a good deal more realistic, at least among films at the time, if not, or at least I guess within like foreign or more European films I've seen at this time, as opposed to like mainstream or even mainstream films. Yeah, and even though it's a melodrama, I think certain moments really do. I think the overall tone of the film is very solemn, and I think that kind of goes a ways to like reinforcing, I guess, some of the themes in that, but also kind of playing down some of the melodrama. And so again, it just doesn't seem like excessively over the top. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think I also get a definite feel of like watching this. I wonder if you've ever seen the Saragossa manuscript.
I have not. I've heard great things about it, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I feel like this has got to be a very big influence on it. Just like that kind of sense of like isolation, like, you know, you're kind of in the middle of nowhere. It's sort of a backwoods part of the world, and you know, there's like these supernatural occurrences that kind of go on, and yeah, just kind of getting involved in the lives of the townspeople, and kind of digging into, you know, I guess people making these oaths or taking a vow, and like those having serious ramifications as opposed to you know, in real life where I guess they don't. But yeah, I feel that there was a good deal of overlap, or at least influence, on that film.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but I've heard nothing but great things. But I mean, I think, yeah, it is realism, but I mean, they have moments where they are stylized. I think of the messenger who kind of walks and disappears and then reappears at someplace else, literally on screen. They certainly suggest some sort of supernatural dimension to him. The graveyard scenes are always a little bit, you get a little bit away with that, and they have a messenger saying, like, if you leave the bride alone before her wedding, demons will come and carry her off, which isn't in the class of even a man that's pure heart and says his prayers at night will become a wolf when the wolfbane blooms and the moon is full and bright. Not quite in that class, but it is still kind of a memorable little repeated, well, I guess not quite poem, but saying that brings forth what the supernatural threat is, and I think it's a good little use of that. And then there's the Dance of the Dead sequence itself, which I think is straight up expressionism. Even with the dead lover kind of fading in over the gull-dressed lead dancer, and just the way that they were dancing themselves is certainly not what I would consider a wedding dance in any culture.
I don't think some of those actors were professional dancers. I don't mean to break it to you, but it's also like a really violent counterpoint to the very serious like ceremonial scenes at the beginning of the movie as well, right, where, you know, it's kind of people, you know, singing in this very dour, like kind of slow paced rhythm. So, you know, maybe there is a bit of maybe there's more credit to those scenes early on in the film than I'm giving them, but there's still a lot of them, and they go on for a long time. and I mean, the actual Dybbuk doesn't really show up until like the last maybe third, probably more likely quarter of the movie.
Yeah, it's pretty late.
But
they
just other
spend a lot of time building up all the relationships and that, but I do kind of like one of the solutions that they come up with, which is only in a Jewish culture, would be that they would go to trial with the spirit that's supposedly behind it. And I didn't quite get that, but like, I mean, so we're kind of jumping to the end, but there's some other parts maybe we can go back to. But so at the end, they have the court, right,
and the decision is they excommunicate. So do they excommunicate Leah to? I don't know. Like
they excommunicate the spirit of Shonen.
Okay. They excommunicate
after they have a hearing to rule on Neeson's vow that he had made with Sender that the two would get married, to see whether Sender had actually done a wrong to Neeson's family. Okay,
because I thought they were going into some loophole in like Jewish theology so that they could like excommunicate Leah and then somehow get the spirit out after she's been excommunicated, so that she's no longer bound by the vow, and then they'll just re-communicate her and leave Shonen out. But it makes more sense to just excommunicate the spirit.
Yeah, well, I believe they after they got him out, they kind of gave a loophole so that he could go back in or join the afterlife or move on to the afterlife. But I felt it more that he was excommunicated from the community rather than from the faith.
Okay.
But I think it's a little... That might be getting above my pay grade as far as Jewish religious fine points.
Mm-hmm. But I think overall, like I do like just that idea of the story, and that's another thing I think in Saragossa manuscript, like the past kind of coming back to haunt someone, and more to the point, somebody being condemned by actions over which they had no control, which is kind of a cynical way, I think, of maybe looking at religion, or at least like the importance of this oath, even though ultimately it is kind of religion that redeems them. But I feel like there are some moments here where there's some unusual jabs at Judaism, probably like the most humorous one, and this is not a musical comedy. I want to emphasize that, but there are musical moments and there are comedic moments. But when they have the kind of quasi montage of Leah growing up, yes, and every time she talks to her dad, he says, "Go away" or "Don't bother me, I'm counting money."
Yes, it's very Citizen Kane-like.
Yes, yeah, exactly, and that's and that's one of the things that I think shows a deal of sophistication on the part of the camera work, and I think there's some composition parts that are really good. But like, it's in Citizen Kane, there's the big the famous scene of Kane eating the breakfast table, right? And this one, it's he's at the table, his daughter is off, but they never show them in the same frame as each other. It's always the father's to the left, the daughter's to the right, and both figures are out of frame as the scene's going on, which is a neat way of kind of emphasizing that disconnect between them. And I guess also maybe for just the effects of having her age, although I don't think it's all one take, but it helps. But yeah, and I think that happens quite a few times in this, and or at least like having characters in the frame together. Like the camera will confine itself to just having those two characters specifically in the frame. Mm-hmm. Like when the two friends make their vow and are at the religious ceremony and are telling, which is another bit of humor early on when they're waiting to tell the rabbi about their sacred vow, and okay, we'll wait this song out and then we'll tell him. Okay, we'll wait this song out and then we'll tell him. Or when Shonen and Leah are at the grave of, I think, her mother, and they're kind of like I think it's the last time they meet, but she accidentally holds his hand, and they're facing each other, and right as they're facing each other, the messenger comes up and comments that here lies a bride and a bridegroom, they are long departed from this world, and you might as well just have a flashing red sign that says foreshadowing coming across the screen, but something like that, where like the composition of the shot is like so extreme and kind of like on the nose. I mean, that's something I think Orson Welles did pretty frequently in his movies as well. Like the shot in Magnificent Ambersons where, I'm trying to think, George's mother goes to say goodbye to, it's George is saying, I think, goodbye to Joseph Cotton's daughter, and his mother, is in the foreground, and just like you see the profile or silhouette come between their two faces, but like something very, very kind of on the nose like that. And Wells does that, I think, a lot in Othello, or particularly like the Shakespeare adaptations, quite a bit. So that makes sense. Another thing, some of the editing I really like too, in particular the storm where the father is lost at sea. Mm-hmm. Where it's like very, very erratic and jagged, and like you cut back and forth between the storm clouds and the sea and the father on the boat and his friend yelling to him saying, "I will remember your sacred vow," and like the whole sequence where he's lost at sea is pretty powerful, and it's it's something too where I don't think you really kind of see that kind of violent editing anywhere else in the film, and so it kind of has like a neat, kind of a neat impact or a sense of energy that doesn't appear that often throughout the rest of the film.
No, I mean I don't know if I would call the pace of the film languid, but it's certainly not in any sort of hurry for most of it. It is kind of it moves along. I mean, I think every scene does advance the plot, but you could probably skip some of the small micro steps that it advances and get through it sooner, or cut out some of the songs, even if they do lead to some moments where characters are getting impatient while some songs are being sung while they want to get their vow across to the rabbi. But I guess the rabbi, I don't even know if the rabbi would have cared what kind of vow they made between the two of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And even the scene where Shannon passes away, I think they just, like, the messenger just comes in and says he's dead. Like,
Yeah.
like, you just, this is kind of like a major point, and there's not too much attention drawn to it.
Well, they do go to right away after that, though, to a big funeral procession, and I do think the way that the shadows play out across the walls and how that one is framed and done and works really well, and I think that's clearly the better scene to get to. If you have to cut a scene short, I think getting to that one accomplishes everything you need to do. Cut to the reaction rather than just some action that we were thinking of.
And it's an interesting way of telling a story too, because you really don't have, like, or at least I guess the main characters that you think you would have, you don't really have. So, like, at the beginning of the film, it's the two friends, but then they're one of them passes away, and then the other one is kind of pushed to the background. And then even for the two lovers that you think this is going to be about, he dies, I guess, midway through the film, and then she's possessed for the last portion of it. So you kind of don't have, like, a central character. Maybe the father, but even then,
maybe Leia.
Yeah, but even then, she's kind of possessed and taken over, and she doesn't really do that much outside of fall in love with the person she originally was supposed to fall in love with.
Yeah, that's some Romeo and Juliet tragic setup there.
Yeah, I think it kind of ends up being the rabbi, and I guess that makes sense, but again, he only shows up for, like, the last 15 minutes or so. Although he does have my favorite hand motion in the movie when Leah's father goes to talk with him and confess that he made this vow. Before he confesses it, the rabbi says, "Well, you must have done something to make your daughter possessed." And he's sitting at a desk, and you can't see this obviously, but he's holding up his two arms, and they're kind of like extended out. And he has his index fingers pointed at him, and he starts kind of like waving his hands up and down like like a game show host or something. It's terrific. Trying to think other points. I like Shen talking about Kabbalah and his reasoning that even something that Satan created has to be holy or has a holiness in it because God is holy, and his friend kind of stops the conversation right there.
As he should.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can talk yourself into anything with that kind of reasoning.
Exactly.
I do actually think Leia and Shannon actually have some chemistry together too, or at least it's framed like they do. So I think the love story, which usually is the weakest thing in some of these older films, actually pretty much works. I mean, I believe that they are taken with each other.
I do too, and I like the relationship as well. And I feel like it is a pretty powerful moment where she says, like, I don't want to live without you, and so I will take your soul into my body, and we can be together that way. Unconventional, love story.
Very.
But I think that's kind of a neat character moment where, everyone is living by these rules that were defined thousands of years ago, and she's someone who just kind of wants to stand up and not necessarily defy Judaism, but just defy like the normal course of events, I guess, or defy.
Well, she wants to be have her own agency. I guess I won't say this is critical of Judaism, but I think it takes a few shots at the patriarchal structure of the society here, or at least a few criticisms of it.
And it's weird too, like that. I mean, they make a point of saying that, okay, this may be a sacred vow, but this is a sacred vow between the two of you. This is not upheld or recognized or even condoned by the church. But on the other hand, they actually end up falling for each other.
Yes. Like it's destiny.
Yeah. All things naturally.
Yeah.
Are being equal. So, how about the messenger? Is he a good guy or a bad guy?
I guess if you had listened to him all along, he would be a good guy. I think he's kind of a neutral judge of the whole thing that's going on, rather than taking sides. But I would say that if they had listened to him all along and did go through with these silly vows and all of that, it would have worked out better for everybody. Or maybe not, because I mean, I think the way it would work out best is if those two had ended up together, and if somebody had said to Sender before he had arranged the match, hey, this is the son of your old friend Neeson that you had vowed to marry off to your daughter. Maybe things would have worked out better, but I guess that wouldn't be a tragedy. Well, it wouldn't have been a tragedy, but I guess if I only knew now what I knew then, I guess that is the basis of a lot of tragedy.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if they like wholly sell the idea of Leah's father, like his motivation for ignoring the vow to be just greed, because he doesn't really know like what the situation is with Shannon's father or family.
Well, he must have known that Neeson had died.
Yeah, but he never really like keeps tabs on him, or why wouldn't he help out or take over or something like that? Like, why would he make the vow in the first place if he didn't expect to get anything from making the vow?
Well, maybe he expected Neeson to do well in business for himself, and then they would both be two rich families that unite eventually.
Maybe, but does that ever?
No, it's not. It's not text. It might be subtext, but it's not text. But I think he thought that it was going to be a match that would be good for both families because they were friends and they thought they were both going to be successful at life. And clearly, Sender is successful if drives a hard bargain.
What does Sender do? Also, that's.
I don't know. It's not clear. I mean, I think he has some land and probably is the farming in some aspect. Certainly he's not a farmer, but he manages a farm of some sort, I would think, because he's selling land and he's buying oxen. I don't know, maybe he's just a trader of some sort, but it seems like he's at least involved in the agricultural business in some aspect.
He just counts money. People just keep handing him money to count.
After he makes them, drives the price up from 5 to 10.
Yeah.
Whatever it has to be, it's a multiple of 5, but he'll want a multiple of 10. Which I certainly think is a running joke here.
Well, and Passover's on the 10th, so all the more appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, this is really not a Passover film, but it certainly is a Jewish film.
Yes, it is. Actually, that was something too. So when you were watching this, I assume you were watching with subtitles.
Yes, I was.
Did it seem like the actors would speak a lot before the actual subtitle came up on the screen?
Not too much in my version. I mean, certainly I think Yiddish has a little more syllables in their language than English does, but I thought it was relatively good. But I don't know which version you watch, because there's certainly multiple versions floating around out there. Did you watch the one that's on YouTube?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Yeah, I watched a different version of that, which I think was a little sharper.
Mm-hmm.
The subtitles were a little better. But I think it was pretty... that version was a little better. But at least it's out there, and I'm glad that people are able to see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting film. I also think the actress who plays Leah, she has a very striking appearance.
Mm-hmm.
Like not kind of like the traditional leading lady or beauty or what have you.
Oh no, she's no bombshell.
No, but she's very, very attractive in a strange, like kind of exotic way. Like an exotic girl next door way.
Yeah, she seems down to earth, but she's not. But she is very attractive and kind of tall and long features.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll take it.
And her long, I guess, pigtails or whatever you would call that are certainly emphasized to kind of go with her long, thin figure.
Mm-hmm. And she fills out that white dressing gown quite well.
Yeah, we have a lot of costuming. I think all the costuming is very well done, and especially when the wedding scene comes around, they go all out on that with the dancing, and even with the peasant. Well, maybe not with the peasants so much, but with the upper class. Certainly, there's some sort of class conflict going on in the film. I think Sender certainly looks down on Shonen, probably even after he finds out that he's Neeson's son, just because he has no money.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he likes him enough that he'll charitably let him eat at his house.
Mm-hmm.
But it's any thought of that being a match for his daughter is off the table.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like it's more paying lip service to the church, like being hospitable only because he's a student who's going into religious studies.
Yeah, and I know the peasants complain that Sender's kind of stingy about what he's giving away at the wedding.
That is my favorite quote of the movie, especially too because you get the best Debbie Downer moment from the messenger.
Mm-hmm.
Where the peasants are complaining that all the wealthy patrons at the festival get fancy rolls, and all they get are just pieces of bread. And then the messenger, in his own way, just comes up between the two people, or the main person who's speaking and the crowd, and says, "What does it matter? It'll all be food for worms anyway." And then just walks away. Like, Jesus, dude, smile for once in your life.
Yeah, he's funny and just how serious he is all the time.
Yeah, it's like the origin of "You're not wrong, messenger. You're just an asshole." Yeah, I'm trying to think anything else. The messenger disappearing special effect, Shannon's face meld into the skull.
I like the smoke appearing when Shannon is trying to summon spirits. Ultimately, I think that's a nice, expressive set of filming.
Mm-hmm.
It certainly has enough fantasy elements that I certainly count it as a genre film.
Mm-hmm.
But it is certainly one that it's kind of... it certainly doesn't quite go to horror, but you can see some influences of horror in it, and even it is kind of the laid-back version of The Exorcist at the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Exorcist goes to trial. If they had a court scene,
the power of the Jewish community compels you.
Yeah. Actually, probably also should mention that even though they do have kind of supernatural special effects, I think the entire presence or idea of the Dybbuk is conveyed just by the actress playing Leah. Like there's no special effects or anything. Her voice doesn't get deep or extra high pitched or anything. Mm-hmm. When she's possessed, it's all in her
body language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think she's very good. I don't know who was the standout here, but she's certainly very good in the part. So, I think I ended up enjoying it very much. I know Sarah got confused over Shonen and her friend who was who at some points or the other. I guess that was probably a part of the print that was a problem there, that wasn't quite clear enough. But I think overall it's still good, and I'm glad that it managed to survive World War II. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a very interesting, and I think it's a really out of our box choice. I know I think it was Patrick Rapal said that that people ought to be doing more obscure films about 6 months ago, and I said, well, okay, we're at where the long tail ends. Yeah, our motto is we watch what no one else is watching. So I thought this would be a good one to fill in, because it's certainly different than the cult films that everybody else talks about.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we do. I mean, you have to keep in mind, like, this is cult within our little world of That's cult true. Films. So, like, the movies that are mainstream among our circles are pretty much cult movies or long tail for everyone else.
True.
Like, even if you were to go farther and just, like, mainstream movie critics, like, our immediate circle is watches the more obscure stuff, and within that, I think this is definitely more obscure than the more obscure than the more obscure.
This is really out there on the long tail.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, I have no problems with that, and I think it's a very interesting film to watch. I had to remind myself that it was as recent as 1937, because it does seem a little bit older. It seems like something from maybe a decade or 2 decades, well, maybe 15 years before then. Because this is only 4 years from Citizen Kane.
Yeah, and I doubt Wells had seen it beforehand, though Wells probably devoured everything that came across. I still can't see Wells going to some sort of Jewish theater in New York just to catch the Dybbuk.
No, but he may have been in Poland at the time.
I think this was still before. He was all over, so who knows? Even so, I think this is. I know it got a release in the U.S., and I think it's a very an interesting film, an interesting story, and it certainly expresses thoughts about religion that one would not expect to find out. As you said, there's not many films like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any other insights from Sarah on this movie?
She said that it was clearly in Yiddish, which she speaks a little bit of Hebrew, but not Yiddish, so she only knows a smattering of it. Although the prayers and that were in Hebrew as appropriate. Said the writing around town was definitely in Hebrew. And other than that, she basically said that at least in mainstream Judaism, they don't really believe in demons, but they do believe in spirits. So I think this kind of matches in with that that fine point. So it's not a demon possessing a person; it's a spirit or a soul, as the case may be.
Yeah, well, and somebody choosing to be possessed too, which is interesting.
Yeah, and the Kabbalah obviously played a role in it. I believe Shannon said he was in Kabbalism, but I don't know if she had too much other than that, other than just noting that it was definitely a Jewish film, as we have noticed.
Mm-hmm. Which is difficult not to notice.
Every scene says that.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Oh, cool. So are you going to seek out any further Jewish cinema for us to...
we may have to do that. I mean, there's certainly many holidays that we can utilize for that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, is there a genre of, like, Hanukkah slashers that,
there ought to
like
be.
There's for Christmas, or...
We really ought to check out if there's what the Israeli horror cinema is like.
Mm-hmm. I'm totally down for that.
I mean, we got the Golem. Certainly is something that we can look at, but I mean, the Israeli films that seem to make it to the U.S. are dramas and kind of maybe some light dramedies.
Mm-hmm.
Or light melodramas, but we certainly don't get much for Israeli genre cinema, and there must be some of that out there. There's got to be some Israeli police procedurals or action films or something.
Mm-hmm. Well, to that too, I don't know why I'm thinking of this, but I really want to do a really bad Bollywood sci-fi film for the next Denali or Diwali.
Well, if you can come up with one, I certainly would watch it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I think we'll have to return to Jewish films at some point. And I would be interested. If we can find something as interesting as the Dybbuk, I think we'll be doing well for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And lastly, how does this compare with the Dybbuk short, Before a Serious Man? Which actually, I guess you could say A Serious Man is a Jewish film.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would believe the Coens had seen this.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that's almost a certainty, and I think I prefer what the Coens did. But then again, they are more modern. But it certainly seems like a companion piece to it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think Foivish Finkel in that does look like the messenger in this film. The time period is the same. Yeah, although I think that's kind of like the only parallels, but
it's a pretty unique parallel.
Yeah, well, I guess the point of that is I think more like uncertainty, whereas here you definitely know,
yes,
that she's possessed.
Yeah, and the destiny and star-crossed lovers thing going on in there, and so I mean, I think it's a. I guess we got fate and destiny as the agents of tragedy in this one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, how many stars of David would you give?
Out of 5?
Yes, 6. It has to be 6.
Oh, out of 6, huh?
Well, one for each point.
Let's say 4.5.
Okay, I'm gonna go a light 4.
Okay, but I mean, that's still pretty good.
That is good.
Yeah.
That is good, and I'm glad I watched it. I do think it could be cut substantially, but but I would agree with you. I think after the first hour, it does get a lot more engaging.
Mm-hmm. We have to get all the setup out of the way.
But I think they kind of pull back a little bit on, because again, there is a lot of singing and there is a lot of just filming religious processions.
Mm-hmm. Well, the singing and the processions are more interesting in the second half too.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Dance of the Dead is in the second half and the funeral procession is in the second half, and those are a lot more interesting than just going along with the rabbi and singing for the rabbi. Because there's actual drama going on with those scenes.
Mm-hmm. I would agree.
Okay, well, I think that's about wraps it up. Thank you for listening. If you have any suggestions for other Jewish films that we should be watching for some upcoming holidays, feel free to send them along. You can send us email at skiespodcast@gmail.com. You can leave a message and the topic at wherelongtailends.com, or you can leave a message on Facebook. So thanks everybody for listening. Of the people of the faith, I hope you enjoy your Passover holiday, and I hope you'll be joining us soon for other films that we will discuss at wherelongtailends.com. Thank you, and bye.
Shalom.
Vin,
I could have threw in a Frankenstein created woman reference toward the Dybbuk.
Yeah.
So I restrained myself there.
That's very admirable, Robert.